Stars, I'm a fool for your love.
Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of the series. As usual, we are here in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 and we're going to be checking out some of the options to take your game from looking like this to looking like this. Okay, so first going to come over here to the options tab, and as you can see we have three menus. We have the general options, the assistance options and the control options. So we're going to be checking out the control options in the next video, where I'm going to show you how you can set up all your peripherals and any controls that you may have bought. However, in this video we're going to be looking at the general options and assistance options. So first up, we'll start with the general options. Okay, so as you can see on the left we have a bunch of different tabs. However, we're going to start off with the graphics settings. So I have made a previous video about the graphics settings, going into detail about how you can optimize them depending on your PC specs, and also how you can get the best performance out of the sim. So if you want to learn more about that, then go check out that video. But for now I'm just going to scroll through them so you can copy and use them as a baseline. For reference, I have a mid-range PC and I'm using an NVIDIA GTX 1650 graphics card and an Intel Core i5 CPU. Now with these graphics settings that I've shown you here and my PC specs, I usually get around 25 to 30 FPS, which is plenty to run Microsoft Flight Sim. Okay, so moving on to the camera settings. So first up, I have left most of these on the default settings as they work pretty well on their own. The only things I've changed are the free look speed, the zoom speed and a couple of the camera position settings. So you can just go ahead and copy these. I find them to be nice and smooth and work really well for all aircraft. I've also changed the quick view function to the hold mode as well, but I'll explain more about that in the next video. So like I said, I have tested and tried out all of these settings and I've found these to be the most suitable. So if you want, you can just go ahead and copy them. Then moving on to the sound settings. So again, I have left most of these to the default position. First up, I have turned the voices volume down just because I found that the default ATC volume was just way too loud. Then the sound output selection I've left to system default, which is the speakers on my PC. But if you are using headphones or have other speakers that you've connected, or for example surround sound, then you can select them from here. If you are using headphones as well, then you can turn on the headphone simulation, and this will just give you a more immersive feel when flying from the cockpit of the aircraft. Then moving on to traffic, here we have all the ground vehicles and basically things to give the sim a more lively feel. So here you can select the AI traffic, which doesn't require any internet connection, and this is just default AI planes that will fly around, and it just adds a more realistic look to the sim. You also have this slider to change the density of the traffic depending on how many aircraft you want to see around the place. Then you have the airport life section. So here you have the airport vehicle density. So these are all the catering and fuel trucks, and also all the aircraft tugs and things like that. And again, you have a slider to adjust how many you want to see. Then you have the ground aircraft density. I have installed a third-party add-on to install real wildlife traffic, so I've left this to off, but if you want to see some parked aircraft at the gates, then you can adjust the slider to suit what you want. And then finally, worker density. Worker density is just all the marshals walking around the airport, so adjust this to what you want as well. Moving down, we have the land and sea traffic. Pretty explanatory. I have left these all off, just because they do impact frame rate a little bit, and when you're flying above the clouds you can't see these, so I've left them all off. And then AI and multiplayer traffic detail, again I've got a third party add-on installed, so I've left these off. But if you are going to use the AI traffic and the multiplayer, then turn all these on and select the traffic variety to ultra, and this will give you the most realistic and largest variety of aircraft. Then we have the data section. This is where you're going to select all the photogrammetry options that Microsoft is famous for, and also other things as well. So first up we have the data connection section. So this is all the online functionality, the photogrammetry imagery and the Bing data graphics. Turn these all on if you want Microsoft Flight Simulator to look as good as possible, which I'm guessing you do, which is the reason you've bought Microsoft, because of the visuals and how good it looks. So if you want it to look like that, then leave all of these on. Then the data consumption. So this will tell you how much data you've used in the past month, and then there's a little slider here where you can select the day of the month that it'll reset back to 0. So say for example your internet plan refreshes on the 31st of the month, then you can select this to the 31st. Then you can also input a data limit. So if you only have a set amount of data that you can use, then you can select how much data you have available by adjusting the slider. And as you can see there off my screen, it will also give you a warning when you're approaching your data limit. I just leave this off because I don't need to worry about my bandwidth, because I'm at school and school have pretty fast internet. So yeah. Then moving on, we have data bandwidth usage. This is now talking about the speed of your internet. So if you want to limit your internet to a certain amount of megabytes per second, so for example you've got other people on the internet, then you can limit this so that it doesn't slow the internet down. Then we have the rolling cache. So you can create a folder with a reserve amount of storage, and this will allow you to save all the stuff that Microsoft downloads, and it will keep it in this folder so next time you go online, Microsoft doesn't have to re-download everything again. You're basically saving internet, and also if your internet's slow, then it'll load all the things that it needs a lot quicker, rather than having to download them from the internet. Finally, you have the manual cache. So if we go in here, it brings us to the world map. It'll just take a few seconds while it creates that rolling cache folder that I talked about, but it shouldn't be more than a minute, and there we go. And you can see it takes us to a world map. So we can now go anywhere in the world. So if we go here, you can see I've done one before in Scotland, and you basically select an area, and then with your mouse you can select, drag and click, and you can download the photogrammetry images for that selected area. This will then be stored in the rolling cache folder, so Microsoft doesn't have to download it the next time you go to that area. To demonstrate, we'll come down here and we'll look at Gatwick. Like I said, you just select cache new region, then just use your mouse, click and drag an area you want to download. You can also see there are different shades of blue, light blue and dark blue, so this is just the quality of the download. So dark blue means that it's high quality and light blue is lower quality. And then once you're done, just click finish and download, and it'll save everything to that rolling cache folder. Okay, so moving on to the flight model, just leave this to modern. This is all to do with the physics and how the aircraft fly and behave. The only time you change it to legacy is if you download an aircraft that specifically requires a legacy flight model. For example, I've downloaded the Concorde and I have to select the legacy flight model to fly this, but apart from that, leave it to modern. Then the miscellaneous settings. So here we have all the options like the language settings, so you can change the language depending on what language you speak. And then you've also got other things like the pilot avatar. Now this is just the character that you'll see inside the cockpit if you're looking from the external view of the aircraft. I've just left these to the default. I don't really care what the avatar looks like, to be honest. And then finally there at the bottom we have the credits and all the terms and conditions and the legal stuff. Then moving on to the accessibility options, we have some different ones that we can change. For example, we can enable the screen narrator, we can change the text size, we can also change the color of the screen and all the menus if your eyesight isn't the best. So we can have a look here, you've got like red, blue, dark blue, purple, all bunch of different colors. You can also turn off the menu animations, so if we turn that off we can see the menus no longer do that little animations when you hover your mouse over them. And all these settings do little things like that. We can also change the cursor speed, add subtitles and a bunch of other options. So yeah, go play around with those if you need them. Then the developer mode, just ignore this as you won't need to use it. Then VR, here we have some VR settings that you can customize, different buttons on your VR headset, such as resetting the viewpoint to the center of the screen, or turning the VR on or off, all different things like that. So have a play around with all these settings if you use VR. And then finally, onto the experimental version tab, we have some different options. First of all, put the replay tool on, because if you're doing a landing, then you can replay it and watch it back. Very good to see how good your touchdown was and how smooth it was. Then for the rest of the settings, leave them to default because I don't really know what they do, to be honest, so best just leaving them as they were. And then once you're done, don't forget to hit apply and save before you exit, otherwise all your changes will be lost. Alright, now moving on to the assistance options. So these are the options to help you when flying and can make it easier or harder depending on how experienced you are. Now there are 3 presets you can select. You have custom, all assists, middle ground and true to life. So running through them, starting with the aircraft systems. You have auto mixture. If you are new to flying and you don't know what mixture is, then leave this to on. Basically, mixture controls the amount of fuel to air ratio in the engine, so ignore that if you don't know what it is. Unlimited fuel. Honestly, you should probably just leave this on because it just saves you the hassle of worrying about how much fuel your aircraft has and also running out. Aircraft lights, if you put this on, then it will automatically turn off and on the lights on your aircraft depending on the current stage of your flight. So if you don't know what you're doing, then leave this on. Gyro drift, I keep this to on to keep maximum realism in the sim, but if you're new, then just leave this off. Then failure and damage, I actually leave these all off. Even though I have quite a lot of experience flying, I leave them off just because the sim can do weird things sometimes and can think that you've actually had a crash. Also, if you put the damage on, you don't even get any crash animations, and basically what will happen is it'll just cut to a black scene and you'll have to restart your whole flight. Then icing effect, I leave this to visual only because if you get icing, you can see it on the plane and it looks really cool. You'll get all the ice on the plane, but it won't affect the handling, whereas if you put this to on, it'll affect the performance of the plane and make it basically impossible to fly. Then navigation aids, if you turn these on, then you'll get pop-ups on your screen. So for example, the routes and waypoints. If you have any waypoints set in a flight plan, you'll then visibly see them in the sky on the screen, and there'll be a little icon next to them, almost like a little pop-up. Then taxi ribbon, it's actually a good one to turn on if you're taxiing to or from the runway and you don't know where you're going. You can leave this on and it'll give you a little visual guide to show you where the runway is, so quite a nice one. Then the landing path, if you're brand new to flying and you're trying to land but you can't really get lined up with the runway, then this will help you line up and guide you all the way onto the ground. However, I will be doing some landing tutorials soon, so you can leave this off, go watch those when they come out, practice your landings and get good that way. Then the smart cam mode, leave this to manual. The smart cam basically pans the camera to a certain point of interest. However, put this to manual so it doesn't automatically do it when you're flying. Then notifications, so this will give you notifications to help you when you're flying and give you some tips. It'll tell you things such as to increase the thrust, click button X, and it'll come up with a pop-up in the middle of your screen. However, I'd leave these off just because they are really annoying and they're not going to be helping you in the long term, so turn these off. At the start obviously it'll be hard with them off, but you'll learn and pick it up a lot quicker if you leave them off. Then moving on to the piloting section. So here we have some things that will actually help you control the aircraft. So as you can see, it is a big list, so we'll start from the top, beginning with the auto rudder. So what this is going to do is it's going to automatically control the rudder for you to keep the aircraft straight on the runway when you're taking off and landing. So if you don't have rudder pedals, then this can be a good setting to turn on so that when you're taking off or landing you don't drift off the runway. Assisted yoke, don't really know what it does. I'm guessing by what it says it helps you control the aircraft when turning left or right or going up and down, but I've never used it so I don't really know how it works. So my advice is just leave it off. Moving on to assisted checklist, just turn this off. Basically what happens is it gets ahead of you and then begins to do things to the aircraft and messes up your flight. Assisted landing and takeoff does what it says. It helps you take off and land. I haven't used them so don't quite know how they work, but if you're struggling to take off or land, then turn this on. Then moving on to the AI radio communications. Again, turn this off. Similar to the assisted checklist, if you leave this on then it'll start doing things like pushing you back from the gate when you're not ready to. Anti-stall protection, you can leave this on if you're new to flying, as it will basically stop the aircraft from stalling and crashing. Then AI auto trim, again if you're new to flying turn this on because it will manually trim the plane for you. If you don't know what trim is yet, then don't worry about it, just put it on and leave it there for now. And then finally the assisted controller sensitivity, I leave this off. I don't know what it does, but I think from what I've heard it does some weird things to your controller inputs, so leave it off. Then moving on to the points of interest. Now all of these will give you visual pop-ups in the sim. They will show up as little tags to show you things such as landmarks, cities, different airports, fauna, and some different points of interest as well. I leave these all off because they can become very distracting in the sim and detract from the realism. But if you want to do some sightseeing or whatever, then you can leave these on to enable you to see some interesting places. Then finally the user experience, starting with the AI UI panel open on start. Please turn this off. In fact, turn all the open UI panels on start ones to off. This is simply because when you load into a flight, you don't want all the menu panels and option tabs to open because the screen gets really full and cluttered and it's just a big mess, so leave these all off. Then show message log in ATC menu. If I were you, I'd turn this off. It will basically give you a long list of the AC communications and then save them in one of the pop-up menus. ATC voices just leave on because you can turn them off when you're doing a flight, so you might as well just leave them on. Next up, checklist, VFR map and navlog UI panel open at start. Again, like I said earlier, just turn all of these off. Then AI piloting in cursor mode. So if this is on, then what it'll do is if you enable the AI piloting when doing a flight, you won't be able to use your mouse/cursor. However, if this is turned off, then you can still use your mouse, so keep it off. Then the instruments heads up display, cockpit and chase cam. You can leave these on if you're new to flying and it will display your engine power, the position of the flaps, the aircraft attitude and your airspeed and stuff like that around the edges of your screen. So if you don't know how to read the instruments in your aircraft, then leave this on so you know things such as like what altitude you're at and everything like that. Then G effect and G suit, you can just turn these off. The only time I turn them on is if I'm doing the Top Gun Maverick challenges, because if you pull too many G's then you black out, which is very realistic when flying a fighter jet. However, when flying other aircraft such as general aviation aircraft or airliners, then leave this off. Then turn off the end flight when aircraft shuts down. This is so annoying. If this is on, then as soon as you shut down the engines after doing a flight, it will go to a cutscene showing your logbook and then ask you if you want to continue the flight or go back to the main menu, and it's really annoying. So just leave this off, and then when you have finished a flight, then you can manually go back to the main menu by pressing escape and then hitting main menu. So for this reason, leave it off. So there you have it, those are all the general and assistance settings. So use these as a baseline and use what I've said as reference for which settings you want to put on or off. The good thing is that there are plenty of settings for you to customize depending on how you want the sim to look, and also depending on how new you are to flying or how experienced you are. So thank you very much for watching this video. Next episode we will be checking out how to set up your controls and all your peripherals, and we'll be starting to get into some of the flight lessons very soon. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and please subscribe, it really helps out the channel. And I'll see you again in the next video. Goodbye.